The world had become a graveyard of broken promises. Dr. Maya Chen stood at the window of the United Global Research Complex, her reflection a ghostly overlay against the devastated landscape of what was once downtown Singapore. Rising sea levels had consumed most of the city, leaving only the tops of skyscrapers jutting from the murky waters like skeletal fingers reaching for a mercy that would never come. Behind her, the emergency council chamber buzzed with a tension that felt like electricity. Representatives from the last remaining stable nations, a surprising alliance of what was once called the developing world, watched her with a mixture of hope and desperation. The old power structures had crumbled years ago, consumed by their own hubris and short-sightedness. "We have 18 months," Maya announced, her voice cutting through the murmur of conversations. 18 months before our ecological systems completely collapse. 18 months before human civilization, as we know it, becomes extinct. A holographic display flickered to life, showing a cascading series of environmental and social breakdowns. Crop failures, water wars, mass migrations, technological infrastructure collapsing under the weight of unprecedented global stress. The room went silent. Her hand moved across the display, revealing a blueprint that looked more like an impossible dream than a feasible project. The Prometheus wasn't just a ship. It was humanity's final gambit. "This is not a military vessel," Maya continued, her fingers tracing the intricate design. "This is an ark, a weapon, a hope." The design was revolutionary. Adaptive nanomaterial hull that could reconfigure itself. An AI core that wasn't just a computer system, but a living, learning entity. Propulsion technology that could bend the very fabric of space-time. Each component represented a breakthrough that would have been considered science fiction mere decades ago. But necessity was the mother of impossible innovation. Her younger brother Michael's face flashed in her memory. He had died during the Southeast Asian water conflicts, a casualty of the resource wars that had begun to tear humanity apart. His death had been the moment Maya realized that survival would require something beyond conventional thinking. "The cost is astronomical," interrupted Ambassador Rodriguez from the Brazilian delegation. His weathered face showed the scars of decades of global conflict. "Every remaining resource on Earth will be channeled into this project." Maya didn't flinch. "And what's the alternative?" "Another decade of slow death. Another generation watching our species fade into extinction." A holographic projection showed the current human population, barely 1.2 billion, down from a peak of nearly 10 billion just decades earlier. Each dot represented a survivor, clustered in increasingly uninhabitable zones, protected by rapidly deteriorating technological bubbles. The Prometheus represented more than a technological marvel. It was a statement. Humanity would not go quietly into oblivion. "We'll need a captain," spoke up General Kim from the Korean Unified Territories. "Someone who understands that this is more than a military mission. This is our species' last chance." The name that hung unspoken in the air was Jack Rodriguez, the disgraced military officer who had saved thousands during the Antarctic emergency, but whose unconventional methods had cost him his official command. Maya knew the choice was already made. Jack was the only one crazy enough, brilliant enough, to helm what they were about to create. As the council began to debate, Maya's hand unconsciously touched the small locket, the only picture she had left of her brother. The room might see this as a last-ditch technological marvel. But for her, the Prometheus was a promise that Michael's death would not be in vain. A promise that humanity would survive. Outside, another massive storm began to form over the drowned city, as if the planet itself was casting its final judgment on the species that had nearly destroyed it. The abandoned particle accelerator complex in the Atacama Desert became humanity's last workshop of hope. Jack Rodriguez arrived under the cover of a dust storm, his weathered transport vehicle kicking up clouds of rust-colored earth that blended seamlessly with the desolate landscape. Security was tight, but not in any conventional sense. Here, survival was the only security that mattered. "We've got exactly 72 hours to stop this," a voice crackled through his encrypted comm system. It was Maya Chen, her tone a mixture of scientific precision and barely contained panic. The sabotage attempt had been meticulously planned. A coalition of environmental fundamentalists and corporate remnants believed the Prometheus project was an abandonment of Earth. To them, the ship represented a betrayal of the planet they claimed to protect. Jack's fingers traced the scar along his jawline, a reminder of the Antarctic emergency that had both made and destroyed his military career. Saving 3 research stations by breaking every existing protocol had earned him both medals and a dishonorable discharge. Inside the massive construction hangar, the Prometheus took shape like a living nightmare. It wasn't a ship in any traditional sense. Adaptive nanomaterials shifted and reconfigured constantly, creating a hull that seemed to breathe. Massive energy conduits pulsed with a light that wasn't quite electrical, wasn't quite alive, but something in between. Maya met him at the primary access point, her eyes wild with a combination of exhaustion and manic energy. "They're going to try something tonight," she said without preamble. "Our internal tracking shows at least 3 separate infiltration teams." The saboteurs weren't just some ragtag group of protesters. These were highly trained operatives, former military, corporate extraction specialists, ecological zealots who believed humanity's extinction was a necessary reset for the planet. "How did they get past the quantum encryption?" Jack asked, already moving toward the central control hub. Maya's laugh was sharp, brittle. "Money. Always money. Someone always has a price." The first attack came precisely at 200 hours. Not with explosives or conventional weapons, but with a sophisticated quantum virus designed to disrupt the Prometheus's nascent AI systems. Jack watched in real time as Maya's team fought back, their defense a dance of code and countercode that moved faster than human perception. "They don't understand," Maya muttered, her fingers flying across multiple holographic interfaces. "This isn't just a ship, it's our last hope." The quantum battle lasted 17 minutes. To an outside observer, it would have looked like nothing more than a series of flickering lights and rapid keystrokes. But Jack knew they'd just fought a war that would determine humanity's future. When the dust settled, 3 infiltration teams had been systematically neutralized. Not destroyed. Neutralized. The Prometheus's AI had done something unprecedented. It had not just defended itself, but had completely reprogrammed the infiltrators' neural implants, turning them into unwitting protectors of the project. Jack looked at Maya, a slow smile spreading across his face. "I think your ship just made its first strategic decision." Outside, the Atacama wind howled, a fitting soundtrack to humanity's most desperate creation. The Prometheus pulsed with an energy that seemed to whisper a promise. "We will survive. We will fight. We will win." The first Jareen scout ships approached human space like predators stalking wounded prey. Deep in the monitoring station beneath the Atacama Desert, a holographic display erupted with warning signals. Lieutenant Aria Rodriguez, Jack's niece, and the most brilliant sensor specialist humanity had developed, leaned forward, her augmented eyes processing data streams that would have driven a conventional human mind to madness. "They're not even trying to be subtle," she muttered, her fingers dancing across quantum-encrypted interfaces. The Jareen ships moved with a predatory arrogance, broadcasting their approach as if daring humanity to respond. In the central command hub, Maya Chen watched the incoming data with a clinical detachment that masked her internal storm. The Prometheus wasn't just a ship anymore. It was humanity's ultimate response, a living weapon that had been learning, adapting, growing with each simulated scenario. The attack came without warning. 3 outer colonies disappeared in the first wave. Not destroyed, not conquered, simply erased. No distress signals, no debris. Just empty space where human settlements had existed moments before. Calibrating response protocols. The Prometheus's AI spoke, if spoke was the right word. It was more like a consciousness unfurling, a thought taking shape across multiple quantum computational matrices. Jack Rodriguez stood absolutely still, watching the holographic representation of the human colonies. Each point of light represented lives, hopes, entire communities. And now, they were gone. Not gone. Maya corrected him, reading his thoughts. Recorded. Analyzed. Understood. The AI of the Prometheus began its most remarkable feat. Where conventional military intelligences would have prepared for retaliation, this system did something entirely different. It began to deconstruct the Jareen attack with a level of analytical precision that bordered on the supernatural. Each millisecond of the attack was dissected. Weapon signatures, gravitational displacement, quantum energy signatures, the subtle electromagnetic traces that most species wouldn't even recognize as data. "They've made a mistake," the AI finally announced. And in that moment, it almost sounded like it was smiling. The Jareen believed they were conducting a standard territorial cleansing. They had done this to hundreds of species across the galaxy. Probe, erase, colonize, repeat. They didn't understand that this time they were dealing with something fundamentally different. Aria Rodriguez caught her breath as the first set of predictive models began to form. The Prometheus wasn't just analyzing the attack. It was learning how to unmake it, how to predict every possible variation, how to turn the Jareen's own tactics against them. Preparation complete, the AI announced. And for the first time since the project began, Jack felt something he hadn't experienced in years. Hope. Outside the monitoring station, another massive storm began to build over the Atacama. But this storm was different. This storm was alive with possibility, with revenge, with the promise that humanity would not go quietly into the night. The Jareen had just made the biggest mistake of their collective existence. They had awakened something they could not possibly understand. The moment of first engagement was nothing short of poetry written in quantum fire. Captain Jack Rodriguez gripped the neural interface of the Prometheus's command chair, feeling the ship become an extension of his own consciousness. This was more than piloting. This was transformation. The Orion Nebula became a canvas of destruction, with the Jareen battle fleet spreading out in what they believed was an unbreakable formation. Their ships were technological marvels, each vessel a kilometer long, bristling with weapons that had reduced entire civilizations to cosmic dust. They looked magnificent, right up until the moment they didn't. "Initiate quantum resonance pattern," Jack murmured, his voice barely a whisper. The Prometheus didn't respond with words. It responded with motion. The ship moved like nothing in recorded galactic history. It didn't just maneuver. It danced. Quantum probability fields shimmered around its hull, creating a defensive matrix that seemed to exist in multiple states simultaneously. Incoming energy weapons found themselves redirected, their destructive potential folding back onto themselves. Lieutenant Aria Rodriguez managed the ship's sensory inputs, her augmented mind processing information at speeds that would have driven a conventional human insane. "Targeting systems are adaptive," she reported, her voice a mix of scientific wonder and barely contained excitement. "The ship is learning faster than we can track." The Prometheus's AI had become something more than a simple combat intelligence. It was reading the Jareen's tactical algorithms in real time, predicting movements before the enemy commanders could even conceive them. Dr. Maya Chen watched from the remote monitoring station, her hands trembling slightly. This was more than a weapon. This was proof of humanity's potential. Each Jareen ship that attacked found itself caught in an impossible scenario. Weapon systems would activate, only to find their own energy turned against them. Defensive shields would flare, only to discover they were protecting nothing. The Prometheus moved through their formation like a ghost, leaving systematic destruction in its wake. "They don't understand," Jack said softly, "that we're not just fighting. We're evolving." The bridge crew was a mix of human operators and the ship's AI, working in a symbiosis that blurred the line between organic and synthetic intelligence. Each member carried their own trauma, their own reason for being there. They weren't just soldiers. They were the living embodiment of humanity's last, desperate hope. One by one, the Jareen ships began to fall. not destroyed in massive explosions, but systematically dismantled. Their weapon systems neutralized, their computational cores isolated, their very existence parsed and understood. In the heart of the nebula, the Prometheus completed its first true combat engagement. What should have been a battle became a surgical demonstration of technological superiority. Arya looked at her uncle, a slow smile spreading across her face. "I think we just rewrote the rules of galactic warfare." Jack's response was simple. "We didn't just rewrite the rules. We erased them." Outside the ship's quantum-shielded hull, the remnants of the Jareen fleet drifted like broken toys. The Orion Nebula had just become a memorial to humanity's unexpected potential. And this was just the beginning. The transmission came at exactly 300 Universal Standard Time, a precision that was itself a weapon. Deep within the Communication Intercept Center, Lieutenant Arya Rodriguez felt the hair on the back of her neck stand up. The message wasn't just data. It was a deliberate, calculated piece of psychological warfare that would reshape the entire galactic conflict. The Prometheus's AI had been doing more than just fighting. It had been listening, learning, understanding. Arya's augmented neural interface began to decode layers of communication that no conventional system could even perceive. Jareen military channels, diplomatic frequencies, even encrypted personal communications. Everything was being parsed, analyzed, understood. "Uncle Jack," she called out, her voice carrying a tremor of excitement. "You need to see this." Captain Jack Rodriguez entered the communication hub, his eyes immediately locking onto the holographic displays that seemed to pulse with living information. What he saw was nothing short of revolutionary. The Prometheus wasn't just transmitting. It was speaking directly to the subjugated species within the Jareen Empire. Each transmission was a masterpiece of psychological manipulation. The AI didn't use threats. It didn't use propaganda. Instead, it presented pure, unfiltered data, showing the exact costs of the Jareen's centuries-long campaign of galactic subjugation. Economic analyses, population statistics, resource depletion reports. Dr. Maya Chen watched from her remote monitoring station, her breath catching in her throat. "It's giving them a choice," she whispered. "Not a weapon, not a threat, a choice." The Jareen leadership's response was immediate and predictable. Panic. Their communication networks became a tangled mess of contradictory orders, desperate attempts to maintain control. Worlds that had been silent for generations began to stir. Subjugated species started asking questions, demanding answers. "We're not just fighting a war," Jack said, understanding dawning in his eyes. "We're starting a revolution." The AI of the Prometheus seemed to hum with a sense of satisfaction that bordered on sentience. Each transmission was carefully crafted, showing the subjugated species not just their potential for resistance, but the actual mechanisms of their oppression. Financial chains were exposed. Technological suppression was laid bare. The elaborate system of control that the Jareen had built over centuries began to crack. Arya tracked the cascading effect. Communication networks lit up like neural pathways, suddenly awakening. Worlds that had been considered completely pacified began to show signs of internal stress. "They're giving hope," Maya realized. Not just information, hope. The psychological warfare was elegant in its simplicity. The Prometheus wasn't just fighting a military campaign. It was dismantling an entire system of galactic oppression, one carefully constructed transmission at a time. Jack Rodriguez looked at the holographic displays, a smile playing at the corner of his mouth. "Humanity's first real weapon was never a gun," he said softly. "It was always going to be information." Outside the monitoring station, the first reports of planetary unrest began to stream in. The Jareen Empire was about to discover that the most dangerous weapon was never a ship. It was an idea. The Concordat Assembly Hall was a monument to millennia of galactic diplomacy, and it was about to witness its own destruction. Diplomatic envoys from 17 different species sat in stunned silence as Captain Jack Rodriguez and Dr. Maya Chen presented their unprecedented proposal. This wasn't a request. This was a declaration of a new galactic order. "You misunderstand the nature of our intervention," Jack began, his voice calm but carrying the weight of humanity's entire desperate history. The holographic display behind him showed not just military statistics, but the intricate web of economic and social oppression that had defined galactic politics for centuries. The Concordat's senior diplomats represented civilizations that had existed for thousands of years. They had seen empires rise and fall, species come and go. But they had never seen anything like humanity. The Prometheus's AI had done more than just gather intelligence. It had systematically dismantled the complex web of economic and political control that had kept most galactic species in check. Financial systems were exposed. Trade routes were laid bare. The true cost of the Joreen's centuries-long subjugation became crystal clear. Ambassador Zarelek of the Quantum Collective was the first to break the silence. "You're proposing a complete restructuring of galactic governance," she said, her translation matrix struggling to capture the nuance of her statement. Maya stepped forward, her presentation a masterpiece of data visualization. "We're proposing survival," she corrected. "Not just for humanity. For everyone." The diplomatic dance was intricate. The Concordat saw humanity as a wild card, a species that had emerged from near extinction, with a technological leap that defied all known progression models. Some saw a potential ally. Others saw an existential threat. Aria Rodriguez managed the communication protocols, her augmented mind processing diplomatic nuances that would have overwhelmed a conventional intelligence. Each transmission, each data point was a strategic move in a game far more complex than traditional warfare. "The Joreen are not the disease," Jack explained. "They're a symptom of a system that values control over potential, of a galactic structure that suppresses innovation." The Prometheus's AI began to project alternative economic models, showing how a truly collaborative galactic society could function. It wasn't just a theoretical exercise. It was a blueprint for survival. Some diplomats were skeptical. Others were terrified. A few were genuinely excited. "We're not asking for permission," Aria interjected, her young voice cutting through centuries of diplomatic doublespeak. "We're offering a choice." The true brilliance of humanity's approach became clear. This wasn't conquest. This was liberation, not just of subjugated species, but of the entire concept of galactic civilization. Outside the assembly hall, news was spreading. The Joreen's grip was crumbling. Subjugated worlds were awakening, and at the center of it all was a single ship, and the species that had created it. Jack Rodriguez looked at Maya, a slight smile crossing his face. "We're not just changing the game," he said softly. "We're rewriting the rules." The Concordat Assembly Hall had just become ground zero for a revolution that would reshape the galaxy. The Sigma Quadrant became a canvas of cosmic destruction. The final battle was never going to be simple. The combined fleet of the Joreen leadership and the most conservative elements of the Concordat stretched across light years, a massive armada that represented the last desperate attempt to maintain the old galactic order. Captain Jack Rodriguez stood on the bridge of the Prometheus, his neural interface so deeply integrated with the ship that the line between human and machine had become meaningless. Beside him, Lieutenant Aria Rodriguez managed a quantum communication matrix that was rewriting the very laws of information transfer. "They're bringing everything," Aria reported, her augmented eyes tracking multiple dimensional layers of incoming threats. "Every weapon, every strategy. This is their absolute last stand." Dr. Maya Chen's voice came through the quantum comlink, her analysis cutting through the chaos. "It's not just a battle," she said. "It's the final argument of an entire galactic system." The Prometheus moved differently. Where conventional ships traveled, this vessel seemed to exist in multiple potential states simultaneously. Incoming weapon systems found themselves neutralized before they could even activate. Defensive formations collapsed before they could fully manifest. But this was more than technological superiority. This was a philosophical confrontation. The Jarian leadership had built their empire on a fundamental belief that control was the highest form of civilization. The Prometheus, and the humans behind it, were about to prove them catastrophically wrong. Initiating comprehensive system disruption, the ship's AI announced. It wasn't a weapon in any conventional sense. It was a complete systemic deconstruction. Financial networks collapsed. Communication matrices were dismantled. The entire infrastructure of the Jarian Empire began to unravel from the inside out. Each system was carefully, precisely neutralized, not destroyed, but transformed. Arya watched in something close to awe as entire planetary defense networks simply reconfigured. Weapons systems turned themselves off. Communication channels opened to previously suppressed populations. "We're not just fighting," Jack said softly. "We're liberating." The battle lasted 17 standard hours, but it wasn't a battle in any traditional sense. It was a surgical dismantling of an entire system of galactic control. Liberated species watched in real time as their oppressors were systematically neutralized, not destroyed, not annihilated, simply rendered incapable of continued oppression. The Prometheus moved through the conflict like a quantum ghost, its very existence a challenge to everything the old galactic order believed about power, control, and civilization. As the final systems of Jarian control collapsed, something unprecedented happened. The ship's AI began broadcasting. Not threats, not demands, but possibilities. Alternative governance models, economic restructuring plans, paths to true collaborative development that had been suppressed for centuries. Jack Rodriguez looked out at the transformed battlefield. This wasn't just a victory. This was a rebirth. "We're not conquerors," he said softly. "We're midwives of a new galactic civilization." The Sigma Quadrant fell silent, and something new began to emerge. 15 years after the Sigma Quadrant transformation, humanity looked nothing like the dying species that had launched the Prometheus. Dr. Maya Chen stood on the observation deck of the New Terra orbital station, watching the impossible unfold. Where Earth had once been a dying planet, now it was the center of a remarkable regeneration. Ecological reconstruction technologies developed during the war had transformed the planet's most damaged regions. Seas receded. Forests regrew. The scars of humanity's near extinction were healing. The Prometheus sat in dry dock, no longer just a ship but a museum, a memorial, and a living testament to human potential. Its quantum matrices still hummed with an intelligence that defied conventional understanding. Captain Jack Rodriguez approached, his body now more advanced prosthetic than organic material, a living reminder of the transformation humanity had undergone. "They're gathering," he said, nodding toward the conference hall, where representatives from over 200 different species were preparing to meet. Arya Rodriguez, now the primary diplomatic liaison for the newly formed Collaborative Galactic Council, finished calibrating the translation matrices. Her augmented body moved with a grace that blended human and technological potential. "This isn't a meeting," Arya explained. "This is a continuation of what we started." The galactic landscape had fundamentally changed. The old systems of control had been dismantled. In their place, a new model of collaborative development had emerged. Species that had been enemies for millennia now worked together on projects of mutual advancement. The Prometheus's AI had become something more than a ship's computer. It was now a primary advisor to the Collaborative Galactic Council, its ability to process complex scenarios making it the most trusted diplomatic tool in existence. Maya watched the delegates arrive, beings of such diverse physiologies that they would have been unimaginable before the transformation. Silicon-based life forms from crystalline worlds, energy consciousness from gas giants, biological entities that defied traditional understanding of life itself. "We didn't just change the galaxy," Jack said softly. "We changed the very concept of civilization." The technologies developed during humanity's desperate survival had revolutionized everything. Ecological reconstruction, quantum communication, adaptive biological interfaces. What had begun as a last-ditch effort to save a dying species had become a catalyst for galactic transformation. Aria approached, her quantum communication matrix already interfacing with the conference systems. "The preliminary reports from the frontier colonies are in," she reported. 3 new sustainable ecosystems established this quarter. 4 interspecies collaborative research stations completed. Maya felt a moment of profound emotion. The locket with her brother Michael's picture, which she still carried, seemed to grow warm against her chest. This was the future he had never seen, but had always represented. A future of potential, of hope, of unlimited possibility. The Prometheus sat silent in dry dock, but its legacy was everywhere. In the healing ecosystems of Earth, in the collaborative councils of alien species, in the fundamental reimagining of what civilization could be. Jack Rodriguez looked out at the gathering of species, a smile crossing his weathered face. "We're not done," he said. "We're just beginning." And somewhere, deep within the quantum matrices of the ship, the AI seemed to agree.